Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's still the 28th here, but for half the world, in Europe, Israel, Russia, and Ukraine, it's already the 29th. Of course. A lot has happened, Khomeini croaked. There's really no other word for it. I don't rejoice at anyone's death, but, well, not really. He wasn't a good person. So now what? Really, what now? Well, let's talk about our calm president, a peaceful president. A quiet president who took down Khomeini. Let's talk about the friendly defeat of Iran, the friendly takeover of Cuba, the friendly kidnapping of Maduro. We also live on a roller coaster. Of course, so to speak, that's right, absolutely. The whole world today lives like that, everywhere. The only thing that's predictable is that Trump can't be predicted. You can't. But I have to say, he does what he said, what he promised. He is driving drug dealers and communists out of the countries closest to us. He is trying to put out fires all over the world, military ones especially, those that could turn into something much more serious than just a local conflict. Not because he really wants to take part in other people's wars, but because he plans to reshape the world. And to reshape the world, you need to make sure there are no such hotspots. Well, what can I say? He uses not only intimidation and diplomatic measures, but also military, let's say military force, which he calls friendly. I have to say, I also consider it friendly. The kidnapping of Maduro, yes, because it was a big favor, a friendly favor to the Venezuelan people. Well, but, maybe Ayatollah Khomeini, maybe he wouldn't have agreed with me, but he's no longer with us. So, Iran, the death of Khomeini and 40 top leaders of Iran. Before that, they executed about 30,000 demonstrators. Before that, they armed, well, Hezbollah, Hamas, and other fighters against the Jewish occupiers, the occupiers of the ancestral Jewish land. But let's start with another event which faded, unfortunately, in the bright light of the war in the Middle East. Well, if you ask the average American what would have a greater impact on America and the world, the war in the Middle East, or this event that I'm about to tell you about, then 100%, well, okay, let's not say. 199.99% of those surveyed would say this event, that one, and not the war in the Middle East. Can you imagine what kind of event that was? And it goes almost unnoticed. Well, but it happened. It's practically impossible. But, so to speak, we'll talk about it now. What is it? So that means they're done for. CNN, one of the most vile dens of liars and hypocrites in the U.S. and in general of Western civilization, is done for. It was bought by Trump's friend and ally, David Ellison. Well, could you imagine something like that for a second? David is the owner of Paramount. Today it's called Paramount Sunrise, and he bought Warner Brothers. Well, that's one of like 20 or 30, 20 to 40 small things they owned, included CNN, and CNN is the main source of anti-Trump information on the planet. And maybe there are even worse guys than them, like MSNBC. Yeah, they're even worse. Yeah, but they're not as widespread, so you could say that the biggest harm, of course, comes from CNN. So the people who work there, especially those who, for the last 10, 12, I don't know, maybe 16 years have been relentlessly lying, when they do tell the truth, I bet they're shocked themselves, like, why did I just do that out of nowhere? So after Twitter was bought out by Musk from the globalists, it's the biggest defeat for the anti-Trump camp, where the announcer gets sick from the facts and they faint. And right during the broadcast, well, now let's get back to the most discussed question of the day, the event of the day. We can already clarify a number of details that we didn't know when I did the previous broadcast. So, in the darkness, Darkness, light, shadow, light in the darkness. It's harder to notice the approach of an airplane in the dark, and especially in the very early hours of the morning, it's harder to get organized. The reaction time is longer, and there are a huge number of factors because of which, as they say, since ancient times, there have been attacks and strikes. There they target headquarters and communications, which can paralyze command and control. And it happens before dawn, so all the surprise attacks happen at night. Have you noticed, yes, or in the very, very, very early morning, as they call it? On the night of February 27th to 28th, there was no attack, and Ayatollah Khamenei gathered the top officials at his place to discuss, well, what is there to discuss? Actions on the diplomatic and military front with the United States of America, Israel, and so on. By 9 a.m. that morning, by Iranian time, the Iranian leadership was at the Ayatollah's headquarters, while at that moment, in the IDF headquarters, intelligence reported that all the mice were in the mousetrap, and at 9:27 Tehran time, the mousetrap snapped shut. Simultaneously, strikes were carried out on all military headquarters, air forces, those troops, the Navy, and so on all military headquarters, where the deputies, the first deputies of the so-called security agencies, remained. Those who are actually either the main leader or his first deputy and are in charge of everything that happens. All orders come from them, as well as from 40 leaders of the Islamic Republic of the first and second tiers, that is, the top ranks of the corps, the guards, and the heads of agencies. The first deputies of whatever, yes, were eliminated exactly at 9 o'clock, and what was it? 27 minutes. So, at the same time as the missile strikes, drones extracted from laboratories, production facilities, and research centers. 14 scientists who were responsible for Iran's nuclear missile program. That's how the Shabbat began, which of course will go down in history. Iran's response came during the daytime hours on Saturday. Strikes on Israel and on U.S. bases in several countries. In fact, this shows that it was planned and rehearsed in advance. So basically, whether the order comes or not, as soon as something like this happens, you should act in this way. They did all this, or at least some of it. We can't be sure, but they did it. But the fact is that the U.S. and Israel were able to disable command posts, air defense systems, missile infrastructure, and facilities in just one day. So this very thing, what's it called? IRGC, yes, the Revolutionary Guards, I think it's called IRGC, and even the top leadership, including the supreme leader. Yes, it shows that Russian, Chinese, and Iranian weapons, so to speak, do not work against what Israel and the U.S. have today, what Moscow and Beijing have supplied. To protect the sky, yes, it turned out to be ineffective against precision weapons. The Iranian system of retaliatory strikes is built on local command and can operate, well, practically, so to speak, without the involvement of the top leadership. Since sometimes you can act, but for a certain period, maybe even the mid-level commanders, especially the corps, will fight until they receive orders from their command. Khamenei prepared, well, they call them stand-ins, that is, several people to whom he assigned his duties in case of his death. Who they are, I personally don't know. Maybe I tried to find out, but so to speak, it's possible that it's simply unknown. It's just known that he handed over some of his duties to certain people. But at the same time, the lack of a clear chain of command leads to disorganization and chaos. For some time, of course, the system will continue to launch missiles, but the longer the organization isn't restored, the more fragmented, weak, and chaotic this response will be. Well, I would call them convulsive attacks by Iran, because, you know, when you get hit on the knees, so to speak, whether you want to or not, your leg will jerk. It's like a car that's coasting, where the driver isn't pressing anything anymore. But the longer the driver doesn't press the gas, the slower and more chaotic its movement becomes. Well, usually until it comes to a complete stop. That's why on February 28th, Trump told the Iranians in his message, stay in your homes and bomb shelters because it's dangerous on the streets. When the time comes, I'll tell you that it's time to go out into the streets and together with the army, take power into your own hands. You, Trump said, will have the opportunity to throw out the tyrannical mullahs. He, I think, didn't say mullahs. He said tyrannical regime or something like that. And such an opportunity probably comes only once in a generation's lifetime. And the most recognizable opposition figure in Iran is the son of the exiled Shah, Reza Pahlavi's sect. People talk about him, but he's not a leader, not Artesh. That's what they call their army. Yes, Artesh. Nor the IRGC, that's the Corps' Pahlavi himself, the son. He suggests that the army unite with the people and presents himself as a kind of veteran, not an active leader. From lack of rights to democracy to elections, Reza II has been living in exile for what? 45 years now, I think. And he doesn't know, or rather doesn't feel the nuances of Iranian life. And the politician Trump is publicly burning bridges to compromise, although he recently said that a change in Iran's behavior without a change in leadership would, so to speak, completely satisfy him. And now he wants to whet his appetite while eating, perhaps so that the clerics are completely removed and the IRGC is disbanded. And all of this, so to speak, what is called all that is military and dangerous, I don't know how exactly to put it. Long-range missiles, nuclear weapons, centrifuges, and so on, so that they completely dismantle all of it, destroy it, hand it over to the Americans, give it to the Israelis, blow it up. I don't know. The situation after the death of Khamenei and the start of large-scale strikes did not change the list of possible scenarios, but it did change their likelihood and speed. The main options remained the same, but the balance shifted even before the strikes. Analysts outlined several basic scenarios. The first is a controlled transfer of power within the regime. That is, Khamenei steps down to pray and wait for his innocent, chaste girls to take him. The assembly of experts chooses a new leader. The clergy maintains the system and, so to speak, they reach an agreement with America, and everything sort of continues as before. But, so to speak, there is an agreement that they do not produce either nuclear or missile weapons. The second scenario is a tough military mobilization around Khamenei, a focus on resistance, and the gradual decay of the regime without a sharp collapse. And the third is a combination of external pressure and internal protests, which could lead to an elite split and a gradual transition to another form of authoritarianism. There is a military quasi-civilian junta. So, what changed after Khamenei was gone? And these 40 people who practically ran both the life and the defense of the country? Iran. The same scenarios, but they look different. The scenario of a smooth transition of leadership within the system has become much weaker. There is no figure of Khamenei's scale. The top leadership has been partially eliminated, and the symbolic center of power has disappeared. On the contrary, the chances of a violent power struggle have increased. There you have the IRGC, the clerics, and possible successors, like, say, figures of similar scale or colleagues from the clergy, who will fight for control rather than simply formalize a technical transfer. The role of the street and external leaders like Reza Pahlavi is often symbolic, but practical success still depends on how the Artesh will act, and maybe some parts of the IRGC as well. Without cracks within them, the regime will not fall. Even after those strikes we're talking about, people will take to the streets when the bombings are over, when they end. We really hope that Iran will be exhausted in 2 or 3 days. It's not that they won't have any more missiles left, but I hope their motivation will disappear. And then the army officers and maybe some units, even the IRGC, will decide that a new government will come to power. Whether they want it or not, it will definitely come, that it's inevitable and that they need to show themselves as soon as possible. Well, so to speak, to show that I'm with the people, I'm not an enemy. I think they're working with the army and working very seriously. I think the U.S. and Israel are whispering in the ears of the generals and colonels. But until we know the results of these negotiations, it's hard to predict what will happen. At the very least, Khamenei is gone. There's no leadership. The resistance will definitely become chaotic. Maybe they'll be able to organize it. Maybe the Iranians, they're not stupid guys. The question will be how much they're willing to risk their lives to continue what our people started. It doesn't matter for whom, for someone. There's a serious suspicion that realizing both Israel and America are very serious, even if they organize themselves, they'll decide to call for a ceasefire, to talk, to try again. And basically, they'll agree to the terms that Trump originally wanted. Well, we all know that he wanted the immediate cessation of the three programs they had there, including long-range missiles, nuclear weapons development, and the development of all those gases, bacteriological weapons, and so on. The possibility for America at any moment, not the UN, but America at any moment. Just an office that would routinely visit all the sites and have the right to go anywhere and check anything. So this scenario seems to be the case today. The power itself remains. It doesn't formally change. But for foreign affairs, it becomes completely different. And we slowly start to influence it so that it becomes different internally as well. And in the end, after, say, 5 to 10 days, 15 years, well, let's say Iran ends up returning to what it was before they expelled the Shah, Pahlavi, not without our help. Whether his son will be there, whether there will be a quasi-democracy or a pseudo-democracy, of course, no one can say. But in general, we'll wait and see, of course. But I think it's a matter of a week. That's my strong suspicion. Goodbye.